بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وبعد. To continue inshallah with the sunan of the salah by the author Abdul Ghani al-Maydani rahimahullah ta'ala in his book Is'af al-Muridin li'iqamati fara'ad ad-din, and he says the first of the sunan of the salah رفع اليدين للتحريمة حذاء الأذنين للرجل, so for the man to raise his hands to the place of the ears for the initial tahrima, so Allahu Akbar. And for the lady he says وَحِذَاءَ الْمِنْكَبَيْنِ لِلْحُرَّةِ, and for the lady to raise her hands up until the shoulders, وَنَشْرُ الْأَصَابِعِ, and to slightly spread the fingers, وَمُقَارَنَةُ إِحْرَامِ الْمُقْتَدِي لِإِحْرَامِ إِمَامِهِ, and for the person following the imam to announce or to pronounce the tahrima, so the initial introductory dhikr of the salah at the same time or relatively close to the time of the imam. وَوَضْعُ الرَّجُلِ يَدَهُ الْيُمْنَى عَلَى الْيُسْرَى تَحْتَ سُرَّتِهِ, and to place for the man the right hand on top of the left, تَحْتَ سُرَّتِهِ, under the navel area for the salah. He says مُحَلِّقًا بِالْخِنْصَرِ وَالْإِبْهَامِ عَلى الرُّسُغِ, and for the ring finger and the thumb to be made into a circular like gesture around the wrist of the left hand under the navel area. And so at the very least a person places the right on the left. As for grabbing the ring finger with the thumb, etc., if it's not possible or if it's uncomfortable, it's not a major issue, but the right should be on the left, and in the madhab under the navel area. And likewise it's also the madhab of the Hanabila. He says وَوَضْعُ الْمَرْأَةِ يَدَيْهَا عَلَى صَدْرِهَا مِنْ غَيْرِ تَحْلِيقٍ, and as for the lady should place her right hand on the left but on the chest area. It should not be on the navel area, on the chest. Why? Because the asl in the salah of the lady, of the woman, is a satar, to basically cover herself and to preserve herself and to pray in a modest manner. So for the man, for example, you'll find that the man prays in an open manner, spreading himself, etc., whereas the lady she prays in a more preserved manner. And this is something you find running throughout the salah. Whenever the salah of the lady is mentioned in comparison to the salah of the man it's recommended that he spreads himself, i.e. in sujood, his arms from his side and so on and so forth, whereas for the lady she is to bring herself together, likewise where she places her hands. Then he says وَالثَّنَاء, so the initial invocation, الثَّنَاءُ عَلَى اللَّهِ subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there are various manners of doing so as mentioned in the prophetic traditions. وَالتَّعَوُّذُ لِلْقِرَاءَ, and the أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم for the qira'ah. So this is for the qira'ah. So if there is no qira'ah, there is no ta'awudh. وَالتَّسْمِيَةُ أَوَّلَ كُلِّ رَكَعَةٍ, and the tasmiyah, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in every rak'ah. وَالتَّأْمِين, so at the end of Surah Al-Fatiha, Ameen. وَالتَّحْمِيد, and he says وَالْإِسْرَارُ بِهَا, and the previously mentioned, so the thana, the ta'awudh, the tasmiyah, the ta'meen and the tahmid should all be done quietly. So a person may hear their self, but those around them should not be able to hear, at least those in front or behind. Maybe perhaps the person to the side or in each direction can hear it, but as for those in front and behind, etc., they shouldn't really be able to hear it. Likewise for the imam, so the imam, he would recite the ameen, but he does so quietly. And of course there are evidences and statements of the early generations of Islam in relation to these points. We're not going to go into too much detail here, as mentioned previously. It's an introductory text. He says وَالْإِعْتِدَالُ عِنْدَ التَّحْرِيمَ مِنْ غَيْرِ طَأْطَأَةِ الرَّأْسِ, so for the person praying to stand upright for the duration of the tahrima, i.e. its beginning and its end, for the person who is capable of doing so, without basically lowering the neck. وَجَهْرُ الْإِمَامِ بِالتَّكْبِيرِ وَالتَّسْمِيعِ, and for the imam to basically say out loudly the takbir and the tasmi', سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَ, etc. وَتَفْرِيجُ الْقَدَمَيْنِ فِي الْقِيَامِ قَدْرَ أَرْبَعِ أَصَابِعِ, and for the distance between the feet to be the equivalent of basically you could say a hand's length or 4 fingers. And some of the ulama, the fuqaha, they'll mention that it is basically equivalent to each foot being in line with his or her shoulders. وأن تكون السورة المدمومة. But just on that point, as for spreading the feet, and to the extent that a person is touching the feet of the others, this is not from any of the four schools of fiqh. It's not mentioned in the Hanafi madhab, nor the Maliki, or the Shafi'i, or the Hanbali madhab, to place one's foot next to the other person's foot and to touch feet. All of the schools of fiqh, they follow an opinion similar to this opinion, where it's a handspan or a few fingers or shoulder length, to place one's foot next to another person's foot and touch feet. If a person is following a contemporary scholar in doing so, fair enough, they have the right to do so, but they should not enforce that view upon others. So if a person places their foot next to another person's foot, and that person moves their foot away because they don't feel comfortable praying like that, then it should not be the case where the person again moves their foot closer to the other person's foot and basically projects their own view onto the view of their neighbor. This is going to, number one, take away from the person's khashya, and it's taking away from the person doing so's khashya. The purpose of the salah is to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not about where we place our feet. As long as we're praying generally in the way of the Prophet ﷺ, according to the understanding of the companions, which has reached us via these four schools of fiqh, then inshaAllah we can concentrate on the actual purpose of the salah, as-silah bayn al-abdi wal-rabb, to initiate and to continue with that connection between us as the servants and the Lord. He says, وأن تكون السورة المضمومة للفاتحة من طوال المفصل في الفجر والظهر ومن أوساطه في العصر والعشاء ومن قصاره في المغرب إذا كان مقيما وأي سورة شاء لو مسافرا. So now he basically goes into the sunnah of what should be read in the various salawat. So again, more detail is given on that in the larger books, but generally speaking, he says من طوال المفصل in Fajr and Dhuhr, and from the Awsat, from Asr and in Asr and Isha, and from the shorter prayers من قصاره في المغرب إذا كان مقيما. All of this if the person is resident in a city or a town, etc. As for the traveler, he can read from whatever he likes, i.e. There's no particular sunnah in relation to the person who's traveling. Then he says, وَإِطَالَةُ الرَّكْعَةِ الْأُولَى فِي الْفَجْرِ فَقَط, and the lengthening of the first rak'ah in Fajr. So the second rak'ah should be slightly shorter than the first rak'ah. وَتَكْبِيرَاتُ الْإِنْتِقَالِ, the takbirat of the intiqal in the salawat considered to be sunnah. Does it mean that a person should leave them off? No. We have to understand the sunnah for what the understanding it means. The author here, rahimahullah, and the fuqaha generally, they are speaking about the ruling. When they say sunnah, they are not saying that this is something that you can do if you wish to do, or it's something that you may leave off if you wish to leave off. No. What they are saying is, if a person misses these things, then their salah is still valid. It doesn't mean that they should miss these things. It's a ruling in relation to if they miss these things, then they've missed a sunnah. So the salah is still valid, but they should not leave them. And in fact, some of the fuqaha, they mention sujood al-sahu should be offered for the person who misses a sunnah from the prayer, especially if they are consistent in that sunnah. He says, وَتَسْبِيحُ الرُّكُوعِ ثَلَاثًا, and the tasbihat of the ruku' to do it 3 times. Likewise, the sujood. وَأَخْذُ رُكْبَتَيْهِ بِيَدَيْهِ وَتَفْرِيجُ أَصَابِعِهِ, and when in ruku', so when bowing, to basically put one's hands on the knees in a way which is as if he's grabbing the knees, and spread the fingers. So the fingers should be spread. They should not be close together, they should be spread in order to achieve the sunnah in the madhab. He says, وَالْمَرْأَةُ لَا تُفَرِّجْ, and the lady does not. She keeps her hands, her fingers together. Why? Going back to the original asl, that the asl in the salah of the mar'ah is as-satar, that preserving modesty and praying in a way which preserves the modesty and keeps the body closer together is the underlying principle to be followed in the salah of the lady. He says, وَنَصْبُ سَاقَيْهِ وَبَسْطُ ظَهْرِهِ وَتَسْوِيَةُ رَأْسِهِ بِعَجُزِهِ, and whilst he is bowing, to basically keep the legs straight and upright, to keep the back straight and the head in line with the back. And sometimes what you see is some people, when they're praying, in order to straighten their back, they bend their knees slightly. This goes against the sunnah. If a person is only requested or expected to bend their back to the ability that they can naturally do so, they do not need to bend their knees in order to bend their back further. This is not from the sunnah of the prayer. So if a person has a back problem and they can only bend their back to a certain position, as long as they are able to touch their kneecaps with their hands, they are achieving that which is required in the bowing. So it's important not to overextend ourselves in trying to achieve something to the extent that we are going against achieving that particular thing in the first place. He says, وَالْقِيَامُ بَعْدَهُ مُطْمَئِنًا, and after the ruku' to stand with طمأنينة, so in tranquility, etc. Likewise, and when he says stand for the duration of a tasbih, it's sunnah. But in saying that, as we mentioned, the طمأنينة in the furud and the wajibat, etc., it's a wajib. So we have to be careful not to rush through our salah, as this goes against the purpose of the salah. The purpose of salah, standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to build a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to rush it simply to get it done. And the طمأنينة in relation to the furud is actually a wajib. It's something that has to be achieved. He says, وَوَضْعُ رُكْبَتَيْهِ ثُمَّ يَدَيْهِ ثُمَّ وَجْهَهُ لِلسُّجُودِ وَعَكْسُهُ لِلنُّهُودِ. So now he's going to mention the sunnah of how a person goes into sujood. He says he places first his knees, then his hands, then his face. And it's the opposite for raising. So a person will raise their head first, then the knees, and onto their feet. He says, وَكَوْنُ السُّجُودِ بَيْنَ كَفَّيْهِ. Now he's speaking about the position of the sujood. So where a person places the head whilst in prostration, which is between his hands. So the hand should be besides the person's head when they are prostrating. And again, it's if a person is able to do so. A person should not extend themselves if they are unable to do so, to the extent that it becomes uncomfortable for them to prostrate. The prostration, it's for the purpose of connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that should be given precedence. So as we see in the sunnah, the person who cannot stand can sit, the person who cannot sit can lie, etc. So likewise, in these sunnah, if a person is not able to achieve the sunnah because of some sort of impediment or something which is preventing him, he does not need to extend himself beyond his natural ability to do so. He says, وَتَسْبِيحُهُ فِيهِ ثَلَاثًا. So as we mentioned with the ruku', the tasbih in the sujood, the prostration, 3 times. It's the sunnah. وَمُجَافَاتُ الرَّجُلِ بَطْنَهُ عَنْ فَخِذَيْهِ وَمِرْفَقَيْهِ عَنْ جَنْبَيْهِ وَذِرَاعَيْهِ عَنِ الْأَرْضِ. And for the man, when he is in prostration, to extend his arms and to separate them from his sides. Likewise, his stomach from his thighs. So basically, the man extends himself slightly. So he will extend his arms slightly and have them raised above his sides, not tucked in. Likewise, his stomach would be extended, so because he's extended forward, his stomach would not be tucked into his thighs, etc. Again, this sunnah has to be contextualized. If a person is praying in jama'ah and there is no space, then it would be considered a wrong to extend the arms and harm the other person. And sometimes you find some young people, they will do this, and when a person complains, they'll say, I'm trying to do the sunnah. You're doing something which goes against the sunnah. Now you're doing something which is haram for the purpose of achieving a sunnah. You're harming another person for the purpose of achieving a sunnah. And from the sunnah is leaving off the sunnah sometimes. So if you're in jama'ah and there is no space to extend the arms and extend the body, etc., then it is not to be done in that situation. He says, وَانْخِفَاضُ الْمَرْأَةِ وَلَزْقُهَا بَطْنَهَا بِفَخِذَيْهَا. As for the lady, the woman, when praying, she is to basically tuck herself in. So her stomach would be tucked in above her thighs, and her arms would be tucked into her sides, etc. As we mentioned, because the asl is as-satar in the salah of the lady. He says, وَالْجَلْسَةُ بَيْنَ السَّجْدَتَيْنِ كَحَالَةِ التَّشَهُّدِ. And a slight sitting in between the 2 sujoods, just as a person would sit in tashahhud. So with the iftirash, the right foot being raised on the toes and the left foot tucked in beneath the person sitting. He goes on to that, وَافْتِرَاشُ الرَّجُلِ رِجْلَهُ الْيُسْرَى وَنَصْبُ الْيُمْنَى. So the right foot being raised, i.e. raised on the sadr al-qadam, as they say, so the ball of the foot, the toes facing the qibla, and the back of the foot being raised, and the left foot tucked in underneath a person's bottom as they're sitting. He says, وَالْإِشَارَةُ بِالْمُسَبِّحَةِ فِي الصَّحِيحِ يَرْفَعُهَا عِنْدَ النَّفِي وَيَضُعُهَا عِنْدَ الْإِثْبَاتِ. So the raising of the finger, it's also sunnah. When would he raise the finger? When he comes to ashhadu an la ilaha. So he'll raise at la and he will put it back down at ilaha. And at that time, he would basically place his hands in what would look like a ball, and once he's lowered his hand, he would keep his hand in that position until he says the salam. Then he says, وَقِرَاءَةُ الْفَاتِحَةِ فِيمَا بَعْدَ الْأُولَيَيْنِ. So recitation of Fatiha in the third and the fourth unit of prayer for a 4-united prayer, for the one who is praying alone or the imam, etc. As for the mu'tam, the one praying behind the imam, as we mentioned, the qira'ah of the imam is their qira'ah, so there is no recitation for the person praying behind the imam. Then he says, وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَى النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الجلوس الأخير, and the salat ala nabi صلى الله عليه وسلم in the final sitting for the final tashahhud. وَالدُّعَاء بِمَا يُشْبِهُ أَلْفَاظِ الْقُرْآنِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. So dua in the final tashahhud, which does not resemble the speech of people, or it resembles the dua which you can find in the Quran and the Sunnah. So basically anything which is for the betterment of the akhirah, that which is for the betterment, or that which is in relation to the dunya, in brief, would be considered from that which is similar to the speech of people, and so it should be avoided because it can be seen as something which nullifies the salah. Then he says, وَالْإِلْتِفَاتُ يَمِينًا ثُمَّ يَسَارًا بِالتَّسْلِيمَتَيْن. So to turn to the right and then the left when saying the salam. وَخَفْضُ الثَّانِي عَنِ الْأُولَى. And the second salam, i.e. assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, should be lower than the first, the one on the right. وَمُقَارَنَتُهُ لِسَلَامِ إِمَامِهِ. And for the one who's praying behind the imam, for his salam to be in line or at the same time, to be done concurrently with the salam of the imam. And perhaps it's better to do it slightly after. It would still be in line with the principles of the madhab to do it slightly after the imam, just to make sure that he doesn't do it prior to the imam. Then he says, وَالْبِدَايَةُ بِالْيَمِينِ, to start with the right and then to end with the left. وَانْتِظَارُ الْمَسْبُوقِ فَرَاغَ الْإِمَامِ. And for the person who is the masbuq, so the one who's missed a portion of the salah, to wait for the imam to finish his 2 salams. Although both salams are not considered to be from the wajibat of the salah, it's best that he waits until both salams have been completed by the imam before standing to complete that which he has missed. And so now we reach the mufsidat of the salah, that which nullifies the salah, and inshallah we'll take this in the next lesson. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.